humanitarian pillar. Uh, I agree with you with climate change because now in COP26, and with IDA, we're working closely with IDA on COP26 and CBM Global, and we know that maybe a couple of people with disabilities are there, and maybe only IDA representing people with disabilities. Not many people got their accreditation and badges. Organizations with disabilities they're not prepared yet to go to COP. So maybe this is an opportunity to link what we've missed in COP26 with the Global Disability Summit coming up next year. I think my other proposal would be about armed conflict. This was largely missing in the previous summit, in the humanitarian discussions that we were involved in, and maybe many of you know that Jared will be hosting this event lately this month, and it will be about disability in armed conflict. So maybe this is another aspiration of what maybe other organizations are looking forward from that summit. And I guess commitments under these two themes will be new, will be not committed before, and might be an inspiration for many. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
So shall I take maybe Jose, because my question is similar. Sorry for interrupting, but it's proposing a way forward as well. I've been supporting from already two different organizations on the reporting of the commitments made at the Global Disability Summit. So I was thinking, and that's the question, if it would be possible to access the latest reports, and if there would be a last reporting period for the commitments made. I guess it would be too close, but if we could access the reporting made under humanitarian commitments or by humanitarian agencies who committed to other areas, would be interesting to then analyze and share a report with recommendations. And the second question is there as well NGOs in Norway engaged, as there were NGOs in the UK that were very key in supporting as well in the organization? Those are the two questions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for all the great questions. And I think some of the comments made are actually what we were looking for to hear from the reference group, actually. So let me try to first respond about the commitments. So the latest report we have is the 2020 report, Ricardo. So that is the report that we will that people can use to make reference around what has been achieved. Because, and this is just a matter of timing, we will not have the 2021, so let's say the last 3 years report ready before we will request stakeholders to make commitments, right? So that is the answer to one of your questions. The question about commitments, I guess we definitely agree with the idea of not recycling all commitments, but at the same time, hearing from different stakeholders and OPDs, a lot of them have said that they would like to use the GDS 2022 maybe to take some of the broad commitments made back in London and make them more concrete, and why not to say more implementable. So we do expect that some stakeholders may want to, and it would be acceptable, that can reflect on the commitments made back in London and see what may be smaller in scale but more implementable the commitments that they can make for GDS 2022. Nevertheless, we are not pushing by any means to avoid new ambitious and long-term commitments. So we hope to have for the GDS 2022 maybe a combination of the two. Concrete, shorter in scope, or more precise, more implementable commitments, but at the same time, ambitious commitment, which will definitely drive the agenda forward for the next five years, I would say. One more point that I want to add here. As you can see, you know, themes for the GDS 2022 are what we can call like the classic themes, education, employment, humanitarian action. Maybe an innovation is climate change, but it's because of what has happened between 2018 and now. OPD participation, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess through the menu of commitments, we have the opportunity to actually see, based on the what we can call classic themes, what we can do or how we can shape up the menu of commitments to create the preconditions for some more innovative commitments. And let me use one example that may help us to better understand what I'm trying to say. One of the overarching goals of the GDS 2022 is Build Back Better, and we have been receiving a lot of interest from many stakeholders to see how Build Back Better can be connected to communities. And furthermore, how we can connect ideas around community inclusion with Build Back Better. So, an innovation that a specific working group who is leading the work around Build Back Better community inclusion commitments is doing is looking at what commitments can be related to community inclusion, perhaps in the field of inclusive education. So, what are we trying to achieve through that? Basically, is saying we recognize that inclusive education is still a relevant topic, but we want to do something innovative here, or maybe to complement what has happened for London 2018. So now we will be looking at inclusive education, but what is missing in relation to community inclusion to actually ensure access to inclusive education for children with disabilities. And I think that is something that it will speak a lot to how innovative the next GDS can be in relation to commitments.
Thanks a lot, Jose. That was really helpful. Were there any other questions or reflections at this point from anybody? If not, I have a question on process. Christian, over to you.
Dulal, please go ahead, and then I'll go next.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Christian, given me the privilege to talk. I'm not experienced at all with this group, and what was happening last, when from beginning you start this. But I want to go into a little bit outside of this boundary to talk. One is that we promote the inclusion, the theme of inclusion. We promote the inclusiveness. And we also promote so much the word disability. And I don't understand why. This is my question. And in my experience, if donor give money, then everybody talk for inclusiveness. Inclusiveness to me is that I am working in a garments, or I am the owner of the garments. If someone come to me for job with disabilities, they should employ by the garments owner, not with some sort of support. I mean, some NGOs or some donor, if give them some facilities, then they will give them job. That is not a inclusiveness. That is the charity to me. This is one. And another things, you all and I and we all are working for 1 billion people in the world, and they pay the tax. And they are already contributing to run this world by paying huge tax. In my country, is about $2 billion government receive from the disabled people as indirect tax. When they buy a shirt, when they buy a food, it is auto indirect tax go to the government account. So, and that I mean, why not that these disabled people, why not we promote this as a person with disabilities? We always say person with disabilities, not just the disability. Disabilities is where this finger is disabled. My finger is not functioning. That is my disability, right? You say, so finger is a dead part of my body. So you promoting, if we say disability program, disability inclusiveness, that means we working for inclusiveness, which is already dead. That I want to say that I think we need to think in this world, this terminology also. And secondly, I think another issue is, who is the OPD? What is the definition of the OPD? I give you example like, women development, women rights, you work last, 20, 30 years before, and now almost everywhere women have a kind of equality. They have a lot of advantage now. Because why? They have this, progress. They have this progress because of their organization, women organization. Women organization unitedly is promote the women rights. But disabled people is OPD, we need to consider in that way, and so that who is OPD? If there is a 50% is non-disabled within the OPD, I don't consider this is OPD. It is not a OPD, So if it is lead by non-disabled people, then how we say that OPD? So this is, I think we need to define who is the OPD. The Organization of Persons with Disabilities is mentioned in article number 32. I was personally, fight to include it in the UNCLPD drafting process. But anyway, so that is the another issue I think we need to discuss, as it is a good working place. Another issue is, regarding this summit, it is, who is listen this summit? For whom we do this summit? Who will be the stakeholder come in this summit? It is only me? It is only the disabled person? It is only the people who engage in this field? I think that is not necessary. So we need to determine, we need to focus the key stakeholder. If those people once participate there, then it will be beneficial for us. If there is a prime minister of different country, I think they are the only key, stakeholder in these days in the world. We need to work with them. So once they participate, and I think is a political commitment is another issue, and political participation of disabled people is another issue. These are the things, and I think next time if I have opportunity, so that I will tell you. And here I want to stop.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for your inputs. I just wanted to check if anybody had any other questions for Jose before we go into a brainstorming of what kind of things we can perhaps propose. I know Christian had his hand up before and Marcy has her hand up. Christian, did you still have a question?
No, actually, I reserved that for the brainstorming because it's related to that anyway. Marcy.
Super.
This is Marcy, and my question has, and maybe we're going to talk about this in the brainstorming, but I'm really interested in hearing more about the regional or satellite or ways to engage a much larger group of gatherings. Not sure, given how this is all being planned for, whether safety will even enable people to come together. But very interested to hear how we can optimize any opportunity to get together the people who probably wouldn't have been able to attend, even if we were all traveling at this time.
A good question. Thank you, Marcy. And before I hand back to Jose to respond to the questions, if I can just throw in one of my own that will hopefully open us up to the brainstorming, which is about, Jose, if you're able to share like concretely what we will need to be producing for the GDS Secretariat and the timeframes around that. Back to you.
Thank you. So Marcy, thank you for your question. Satellite summits will also be fully online as the one, we call it Oslo, because it was supposed to be in Oslo, but now it's online as well. And the idea is actually what you were saying, is how we can facilitate more space for interaction and networking. And we have thought that doing that through the regions, we're going to be sort of achieving, I think, two main goals. One is to actually create that space for interaction, for interactive dialogue, but also to see up to what extent we can make the new set of commitments a really implementable list of commitments. Something that we have learned from London, but I think I think you will all agree with me after COVID, is how important the context in which we are in is in terms of determining the commitment implementation. So what we're trying to achieve through the Satellite Summit is actually that, how we can have the same kind of dialogue based on the context, and at the same time, what the regions can contribute to the global discussion. What applies to perhaps the MENA region or the Latin American region when it comes to humanitarian action that can be replicated in other regions, but can also be an input for the global level discussion. But I'm happy to have a even bilateral call with you, Marcy, or with anybody interested to learn more on how to participate in the Satellite Summit. Kristen, about your question, basically what we are asking the DRG working group on the GDS commitments is to draft the menu of commitments. So let's go a little bit back, and we have identified the themes, the co-hosts of the GDS, one of which is inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian crisis, including climate change. The next step for us is to unpack that theme and transforming it into many of commitments. One many of commitments for multilateral agencies and another one for governments, which we think are the two major groups, stakeholders, who we expect they will make commitments. So what does that exactly mean? We want to see, based on your experience and expertise, when we talk about inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian crisis, what should be the priorities for stakeholders to think of and make commitments? Is it about equipping OPDs as key partners for inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action? Is it issues related to shelter, or I don't want to go into details because you are the experts, but basically this is what we are looking for, and we have commitments of between 5, 6, max 7, let's call them like sub-themes under this theme of humanitarian action that can help stakeholders when starting to reflect what type of commitments they would like to make. And if possible, we would like to have one set or one menu of commitments for multilateral agencies with 5 or 6 sub-themes, and other ones which may be the same or maybe slightly different, apply to governments. And the timeline for that is by October 25th, and we apologize in advance for such short notice. We hope that you can send us that first draft of the menu of commitments that can then be analyzed by the co-hosts and hopefully translated into the final version of the menu of commitment, which should be out the first week of November, giving stakeholders more or less 2 months until mid-January to formulate commitments before the next GDS.
Thank you, Jose. That's all very clear. So it seems we have a tight timeline, but I think a tight timeline is sometimes a good thing because some people work well under pressure. I certainly enjoy working well under pressure sometimes. So I think this is a really exciting opportunity, Jose, and I'm really glad that we can support it. So I'm just checking if there's any other burning questions on process until what I suggest we go into is just a bit of a brainstorm on what potential sub-themes can be. What we can do then as DRG co-chairs is put together the first draft to share with you, and then with a very quick turnaround, we start pulling that together as a group. How does that sound in terms of process? Yeah, super. Good. Thumbs up from Marcy. So
before we do that, I would have to leave the call, but I really want to express my appreciation to the co-chairs of the DRG first for accepting this, even with less than 24 hours to think about it, and of course a big thanks to all the members of this working group for allowing us to access to your experience, to your knowledge, and transforming the work that you do on a daily basis into a good menu of commitment, which will hopefully lead to an even better set of commitments for the GDS 2022.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jose, and we really appreciate your time and support. Thank you.
Bye.
Now, we have 15 minutes. So what I suggest is that we really treat this as a brainstorm. So please don't feel like you need to explain why you're proposing a sub-theme or to provide any background, but really just a brainstorm. And if everyone can be as brief as possible, just so that we can get voices from everybody in this last 15 minutes. And we will then share the draft document for your feedback. We'll of course also call another meeting so that we can have some more discussion around those. But let me stop there and open the floor, and please just, Kavita, over to you. Any ideas?
I'm now walking past the Colosseum, so it's really noisy. But the first thing is, okay, I know this sounds not very smart from my end, but IOM had made quite a few commitments the last time that we joined the GDS in London, and that was done through Agnes. But over time, we didn't really, the first year of reporting, we knew what to do. And then after that, we really try hard to get in touch with the right people to report against those commitments, but it was really hard to find anyone. So I think, if there is this renewal of commitments, we really need to, like at the beginning, say, what's going to happen in the future, how we're going to be reporting on them. Like, so those commitments mean things in terms of what we're doing. And that, like progress towards those commitments is going to mean something to the organisation who does it, or to the sector we're working in as well. So that there's just not these meaningless commitments.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. And that's something that we can definitely follow up with the GDS Secretariat as well as a priority. And in our next meeting, perhaps provide a bit more clarity around what the thinking is. It's a good point. Christian, I saw your hand come up.
Yeah, sorry, I was reflecting on the intervention that Shireen and Ricardo made earlier. One thing that was coming to mind is obviously when you make commitments, you need to have also in mind what is the evidence that you're going to bring in terms of how you are progressing in implementing the commitments. So I think that should be probably something that when drafting the menu of commitments and our suggestions, in order to be more concrete on what type of commitments, that at least the commitment itself can be one way or another measurable in terms of the impact that you want to make over the next 2 or 3 year period before the next GDS and the renewal of new commitments in 2 or 3 years' time.
No, it's a good point. I think as we start drafting, absolutely. Thank you. I saw Ricardo's hand come up, then Shireen.
Just quickly, one idea for the brainstorming. Why not structuring the commitments around the must-do actions in the IAC guidelines? Just the first thought.
Good idea, absolutely. I'm writing all this down and we're recording. Shireen, over to you.
Hello, I think I am so much pro climate change, and I already said why. Armed conflict, and I guess I agree with what Jose said, that it would be good to reflect on the specificities under the themes that were already discussed in the Global Disability Summit, like education and employment, because specifically employment and economic empowerment, because that was really a struggle during that time and during the discussions. But I wanted to reflect on Kavita's point about accountability towards where we are reporting. We struggled as well on the first year, and we didn't know where was the report to be submitted and who was holding the accountability. And then I guess now it's all with IDA, but I don't know for this new summit who's holding all parties accountable for the new commitments and the old commitments as well. Thank you.
No, it's
I'm very happy to hear that.
It's definitely an important point. It's one we'll make sure to follow up, because it's also relevant when we start trying to advocate for commitments. We need to know the accountabilities. I think I saw Ulrika's hand next, and then Marcy. Ulrika, over to you.
I couldn't agree more, like with the 2 points, like Ricardo, focusing it around the must-do actions. I think it's something really pragmatic. Agencies could report on, perhaps. I mean, further thinking is needed. And also playing on the point made by Kavita, obviously, HI, we are not, neither multilateral nor governmental, but perhaps also having something which can lead to then being aspirational. So if it's pragmatic and people can also, follow up with some case studies, or people could follow up on what has been done, It could also serve the purpose of being aspirational in terms of, yes, we can do. So yeah, that's my little contribution, because, you know, talking from Somalia, yay, first field mission. I can tell you, having the first training session today, is that people want to see more action on the ground. And that's a very clear message. So to find something where people who are committing, you know, find a way of also demonstrating or showcasing what that actually meant in the field. Thanks. So I don't know, that's a brainstorming contribution after a 10 hours day. Thank you.
It's impressive. After a 10-hour day, absolutely. Thank you. No, I think action on the ground is particularly important. Maybe I'm just about to go over to Marcy and then Kavita, and to check if Dulal, if that's a new hand. But just to throw one point in there from my side, I really like the idea of drawing on the must-do actions. But I wonder whether, given that our menu of commitments is specifically on humanitarian action, how specific are they to humanitarian action? Are they actually sub-themes of humanitarian action and climate change, or are they like cross-cutting themes that we need to make sure all the commitments reflect those? If we're talking about, off the top of my head, I think it's accessibility, participation. Are they actually sub-themes of humanitarian action? I think is a question that we don't necessarily need to answer right now. So Marcy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. This is Marcy. So agree very much. Love the idea of looking at those must-dos. And I'm wondering, have we considered the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy as a sort of central overarching, the 4 pillars, the 15 indicators, and driving those commitments to align with what we already know the UN is committed to. And then taking that outside of that, UN structure.
Absolutely, no, good point. And particularly looking at the commitments, the indicators on humanitarian action.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the key themes that's coming out of this discussion is let's start with what we have. Sorry, Marcy.
I was just going to add, and if you look at those 15 indicators, and having done the training with UNDRR on their piece of those 15 indicators, the humanitarian action is firmly embedded in each one of those. And our job could then be to sort of pull out and help people to see those, both as the must-dos, the humanitarian action broad brush, and then the much larger disability inclusion strategy.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I see a few hands up. I just want to check, Dulal, is that a new hand? Did you have a new?
It's covered
No worries.
already. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Vivian, and then Natalie, and then Kavita. Vivian, over to you.
Thanks. I think I like Marcy's idea. I think it's quite transferable to different types of organizations. The only thing that we would need to kind of pay attention to, and it's a question of mine as well because I wasn't involved in the last one, is are we also talking about states commitments, or is it just different humanitarian actors such as UN agencies, NGOs, etc. So if so, this is something that we might need to look at how that would be transferable to states as well. But I like that idea because again, I think it incorporates issues on humanitarian action, but it's not just focused on UN agencies, but it also looks at other aspects as well. So I like that idea. My 2 cents, sorry.
No, very helpful, Vivian. Thank you. And just for clarity, so the menu of commitments will be for multilateral agencies and government. So government's definitely in there. So good point about adapting to them. I'll go over to Natalie and then Kavita and Ulrike.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really like the idea of connecting commitments also to the UN disability strategy. I think we have like very good content from the strategy and very good guidance, you know, like if we look at the accountability framework and so on, I think we can get like some concrete ideas from there. But also I wanted to maybe bring the intersectionality approach up into the conversation. If we can really look at the commitments with an intersectionality lens, meaning if we can reflect on other factors that could be also important, such as, I don't know, gender, age, race, and so forth. So yeah, that would be my contribution so far.
Absolutely, no, really, really important point. Thank you. And I think, I mean, as we're doing this brainstorm, I can see the menu of commitments taking shape in terms of there are some cross-cutting principles such as intersectionality in the must-do actions, I imagine, in addition to the sub-themes. So it's all really helpful. Kavita, over to you.
Hi, I'm just giving you a view of the Colosseum. The thing that you mentioned, Kirsten, about cross-cutting issues and must-dos, or let's say one of our colleagues frames it as non-negotiable. I think that's really interesting because it's not just humanitarian. It cuts across everything, like sort of governmental policies, legislation. It cuts across work with people in the field. It cuts across what we're doing internally. And I think they would be better framed not as sub-themes, but as like a suite of options that have to be considered within any commitment, if you see what I mean. Because I don't think we should say you can either choose participation or accessibility or data collection. I think those things should come up like they come up in IS, or they come up as non-negotiables. And I think part of this, and something that we often forget, which UNDIS does really well, is the power of communication and advocacy, because we find like we talk about it as like this kind of add-on to what we're doing, but communicating really well and advocating really well and getting to people's hearts, like either through the inclusion of people with disabilities in what we're doing or in other ways, is really important to getting messages across. Whether that's on humanitarian front or on a development front. I think that should be that should be one of those non-negotiables as well.
Absolutely, you know, it's a really good point. Thanks, Kavita. I see Ulrike's hand up, and I think, Christian, you're undecided about putting up your hand. I'll go to Ulrike and then to Christian.
Thanks. Also giving you a little impression from Starry, now inspired by Kavita from Somalia and how one looks in Somalia. So what I wanted to say is, like, maybe we should also think about what we want to encourage with the commitments. So what I liked about the YAS guideline is also that we have already like key considerations per stakeholder. So what do we want to strengthen in terms of, even if we link it with UNDIS, that it's clear what are the two reference frameworks we want to see more of being applied in the field and having an impact. And that does entail really good communication and very clear communication and integrated in a way. And that's what I wanted to share. And I think like that is smart in the YAS guideline, because sometimes it's a bit like, you know, top down, and Ricardo, you put it a bit like you ask NGOs to also now reflect on the UNDIS, but that's a UN that's a UN framework. So I think we may also have some hesitancy from INGOs feeling that, or local NGOs, they haven't been engaged on the discussions around the UNDIS, whereas they have been engaged on the YAS guidelines. So just to be also clear, do we want to promote a common tool that's to be applied, and the CRPD, yeah. So I'm stopping there. So just a thought of what do we want to promote really with these commitments. Thanks.
So it's a really good point. Christian, over to you.
Yes, I was going to go exactly on the same line as Ulrike. We have in the ISC guidelines, we have these roles and responsibilities per stakeholders that touches also on the donors and the governments. And if we take those two under the menu of commitments for bilaterals, there are very concrete actions that are expected from those stakeholders that it would be good that the commitments reflect on. No? So at least we have a consistent messaging both through GDS, following, ISC guidelines, and obviously, if UNDs have more specific concrete action for multilaterals, particularly UN agencies, that would make sense. So yeah, it all comes together. And we do not have necessarily to reinvent the wheel, but mainly to continue advocating for messages that are already out there in various documents, but maybe needs to be more concrete and have a clear reporting mechanism, exactly what you want to report on.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Christian. Really good points. I see that we have 1 minute, and I wanted to wrap up and just make sure we have agreement on the next steps. Kavita, was there some? No, your hand came down. Great.
It just came down.
Okay, no worries. So, this has been a really, really rich discussion, but I also very much recognise it is only our first meeting, and we only had half an hour for the brainstorming. So I do recognise that, all of us have plenty more ideas that we want to share. Given the very tight time frame, what I suggest as next steps is that us as DRG co-chairs, we follow up with Jose on understanding the reporting and accountability mechanisms of these commitments, because that will shape how we're thinking about framing them. We also have a look at both the existing commitments and these existing documents like the ISC guidelines, the UNDIS. Based on that, we will aim to pull together what will be a very rough, very beginning potential menu of commitments, but recognising that we do have, I think, less than 2 weeks. So what I suggest is that we try and share that with you in the next week, and then we have another call in a week to discuss that very, very rough draft. Does that sound okay to people?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
sounds great.
Okay. I just want to tell you that I'm after 25th October is better to have meetings so that I am able to attend.
Unfortunately, we have to deliver this by the 25th of October, but we will be sharing all the updates by email. So we really welcome your inputs by email as well. And we'll continue meeting after the 25th, absolutely.
Okay.
There'll be plenty more work to do.
Okay.
Thank you. So in that case, does this time work well, this time of day? I realise it's end of day in Geneva.
Yeah.
Yeah? Great. Okay, well, let me send out a doodle poll for in about a week, and then